Good morning and welcome to Nottinghamshire Live's hustings for the Rushcliffe constituency ahead of the general election on July the 4th. My name's Natalie Fay and I'm the editor of Nottinghamshire Live and the sister newspaper, the Nottingham Post. And we're hoping to get under the skin of some really local issues today and find out what the candidates joining us on the call think about them. I'm joined by our agenda editor, Oliver Pridmore, who's been out in the constituency finding out people's views, and he's going to be posing the questions to the candidates today. So our candidates do know the rules of the debate, but for the benefit of the audience, we're going to start with opening statements, which are going to be no longer than 1 minute each. And then we'll move on to questions, which candidates will also have a minute to answer. And we're encouraging open debate among all the candidates as well, so hoping to get really stuck into some issues today. After we finish the questions, we're going to close our debate with some statements from everyone again, and everyone will get a fair chance to speak because they'll have 1 minute each on those. And we'll be taking the statements in alphabetical order by surname, but I'm going to be mixing up the order we answer the questions in. And candidates will, of course, have the right of reply if it's deemed necessary. And as I said, we do want to encourage an open debate on many of the topics, so everyone should feel free to get involved. As for the audience, you will be able to leave comments on this broadcast, but we're not taking questions from you today. But we do look at all the comments afterwards, of course. So just as a reminder, the candidates standing in Rushcliffe are Ruth Edwards for the Conservative Party, James Grice for Reform UK, Lynn Irving, who's an independent, Richard Mallender of the Green Party, James Naish of the Labour Party, Harbant Kaur Sarah, who's an independent, Greg Webb for the Liberal Democrats. And we're joined by 6 of these candidates today, as you can see, and we'll come to their opening statements shortly. Unfortunately, James Grice of Reform UK and Richard Mallender of the Green Party couldn't make it, and we did offer them the opportunity to send an opening statement, but neither has done so. So now we'll move on to the opening statements, and Ruth, you will be first. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. Right, 4 years in 1 minute. I've secured over £170 million of investment in new local healthcare facilities, 40 million to create hundreds more school places in Rushcliffe, more than 25 million to improve flood defences and water infrastructure, work with communities to tackle flooding, changed our planning laws to protect Rushcliffe's countryside from thousands of houses Nottingham Labour wants to build here, fought against a gravel pit in Barton and Favours, standing with residents to save Tollerton Airport, passed new laws so glass will soon be collected and recycled from households in Rushcliffe, championed the East Midlands Freeport to create thousands of jobs and secure a green future for the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station, fought to increase the budget to fix our roads by a third, gigabit broadband being rolled out in our rural areas, fought for 400 more police officers in the county, secured investment to tackle antisocial behaviour, shoplifting and burglary, rural patrols and a named officer for every area, backed community campaigns, secured a £1 million defibrillator fund with West Bridgeford Colts and 75 safe spaces for survivors of domestic abuse, more in the next 4 years if you'll have me.
Thank you. That was a minute, exactly, yes. Lynn, over to you. You're next.
I don't think I can do exactly a minute. I'm Lynn Irving. I'm an independent, obviously. I didn't ever think I would stand for Parliament, but it's become so obvious that Westminster sees its role as ruling us. That's even enforced by the BBC. It is not at all. And MPs go to Westminster, they should be speaking for us and trying to gain things for us, not telling us why what Westminster does is good for us. So I want to bring back democracy and actually make the MPs the servants and not the masters. So I advocate direct democracy, which is a little bit of a faff because it means we have to hold referenda, but it means that we get to be the final arbiters of all legislation, and that should put the MPs back in their box because they won't want to have to face a debate on every bit of legislation on which the public are the final arbiters. And it also gets rid of the Lords. Well, it makes them a bit redundant. So I stand for very local issues. I was born here. I live here. People nag me in the street if I...
Thank you. That's a minute. Thanks very much. James Naish of the Labour Party.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm James and I'm Labour's candidate at this election. I think 1966 is etched on all of our minds. It was the time that England's men's football team last won a major tournament. But believe it or not, it's also the last time that Rushcliffe elected a non-Conservative MP. Given the demographic changes that we've seen in Rushcliffe over the past decade, I think this needs to change. We need a forward-thinking, positive, proactive MP in government, a government that's committed to stability, to investment and to reform. For those in the constituency, I've shared my 5 priority areas with you: inward investment, green skills and jobs, transport and infrastructure, public services, and strong communities. Things need to work better for everyone, and that's because we need a Labour government and a Labour MP with drive, focus and vision.
Thanks very much, James. Do apologise for the slight background noise there. We're having work done outside our offices, and I think, Ollie, you were going to mute if you heard that in the future. Harbant Coursera, Independent. Your opening statement, please.
Good morning, everybody. Actually, I'm Harbant Coursera. I've been working with a youth service for last 34 years. I've actually been seeing that democracy is going to the wrong directions, and I just feel that democracy is actually for the people and by the people. And we should be looking at the people, should be have a power, should be have actually own their interest to put into that. I am here to actually protecting the future generation, to make sure the younger.
We appear to have lost Harbant. I'm not sure what's happened there.
Actually need to be seen and to be prioritized for going authority to be actually taking the role to be making decisions for every law we make, and we actually make sure the young people, we're going to go deep down to the roots for finding out what is that actually making them to sit back and not to be participating. What is that to making them to not to be able to achieve what they need to achieve? What is that they need to be not really actually focused on what is there for them? I'm actually looking for the deep down for the cause, and then it will go from young people to younger generation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I gave you slightly bit of extra time because we lost you halfway through.
I know it was a call came through. That's
no problem. Yeah. It happens. And Greg, over to you.
Good morning. I've been speaking to a lot of people recently who've voted Conservative or Labour in the past, but really aren't sure this time. People who voted Conservative thinking it would mean stability, then saw inflation rocketing, the pound falling, and schools and hospitals on the verge of collapse. Or people who voted Labour, heard what Labour had to say before, and have heard so much of it now thrown away. The Liberal Democrats are here to offer a fair deal and real change to help you in your day-to-day lives. We'll recruit extra doctors and dentists so we can offer guaranteed waiting times, not ballooning waiting lists. We'll bring stability and growth back to our economy, cut everyone's energy bills and tackle rising food prices. We'll make sure there are great school places available in your community right now, not force kids to travel long distances every day. We'll stop environmental damage, such as our rivers being filled with more and more sewage. We'll give people a fair deal for people working hard in their day-to-day lives, and will pay for it fairly with a fully costed plan that makes sure ordinary, hard-working families don't have to pay more tax.
Thanks very much, Greg. Thank you for your opening statements, and we'll now move on to the questions which Oliver is going to ask. And just a reminder, you've got a minute to answer them, but we're also encouraging a debate between candidates as well if you want to get involved. Over to you, Ollie.
Thank you very much, and thank you all again for joining us this morning. And I wanted to pick up first of all on the issue of housing and the fact that Rushcliffe, like many areas, is one that is set for some expansion in the coming years. And in particular, we have seen concerns from residents about plans for thousands of new homes around Gamston and Tollerton. So I wanted to ask more broadly how you would work to manage the scale of development in Rushcliffe to meet the concerns of current residents.
And Ruth, we'll come to you first, please.
Thank you. So the reason there's so much concern about this is because Rushcliffe had to take 4,000 houses on top of its own housing target several years ago because Nottingham Labour refused to build them in Nottingham itself. That's had a huge impact on our public services. A lot of the time I've spent has been working to get new school places. We've got, as I said, £40 million investment for new school places, new GPs, the road network. That's all had a knock-on effect. That's why I fought to change planning laws, so to abolish the duty to cooperate, the rule which enabled Nottingham Labour to push houses into Rushcliffe so that they can never do it again. We've been very clear that we'll be prioritising brownfield development in urban city centres and protecting the green belt. We've had some really disturbing messaging from the Labour campaign, including this morning, that they don't care if they concrete over, if they flatten the green belt, they're just going to build houses. I will always work with Rushcliffe's residents to protect our countryside and our communities. Yes, we need more housing, but it must be.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you. That's a minute. Thanks. Lynn, over to you.
Well, I've been appalled by all the housing that's been going on. It's been, looks like some sort of Minecraft development out there. Now, not Labour and Tory can say what they like, but they actually just rip everything up at the after the election anyway. So, I mean, I would preserve, obviously not Tollerton Airport. That's a nice green space and it's a functional utility, functional area for the people. So I'm very into saving that. Now, I think this sort of cuts to the heart of it. We have to build 4,000 houses. Who the hell told us that? You know, central government. Why on earth are they dictating to us what we have to do? And this is where we have to basically put these politicians, Westminster, back in its box and say, actually, we will decide for ourselves whether we want the housing, whether we need it, and how we want it to be done. And it doesn't actually fit in with your environmental policies anyway, because paving over existing ecosystems is a very bad way of sequestering carbon dioxide. If you want to get rid of carbon dioxide, you need to preserve ecosystems.
Thank you. And that's a minute. Thanks very much. And James.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, ultimately, both of the key major parties are committed to building more housing. We recognise that there is a housing crisis. There are twice as many people living in rented accommodation as there were 20 years ago. So I think we have to recognise that there is a requirement for more housing. As a council leader, I've been in charge of a local plan that's only just been adopted. And what that local plan does is really clearly demonstrate where the housing growth is going to be. We've had 6 major consultations on that. And as a result of it, we've got to a place where it has been adopted with lots of resident feedback. That's the right way to go about planning. It needs to involve residents, but it also needs to recognise that we have a wider need. I am very concerned about building on the green belt, but that is why Labour has talked about prioritising brownfield, then the grey belt, and any green belt building does need to include very high percentage of affordable housing, so there is a return for local people.
Thank you, James. Harbant, over to you.
Right. Thank you for that. The party, they are actually in position, right? They are actually looking for the needs for the houses through making more houses and providing more houses. But my option is actually basically we need to look at that, right? Where we can actually save the money, not to making the houses. Actually, the houses are there. People are not able to afford. That's how poverty. People are not able to afford the mortgages. People are not able to pay the duties and get to that. Even both partner working and they're not really able to afford to buy the houses, which is that more we need to highlight these issues to poverty to deal with it and make sure we can actually manage to live them in harmony to people are happy living together and in the parents with the parents and so on. Young people don't need to be coming out every time, because we are not looking at the new generation, coming generation, to giving them opportunity to decide how to deal with it, how to manage it. We are actually...
Thank you. Thanks very much. And Greg.
Thank you. Housing is very much a basic need for everyone, and it should be something that people can afford without having to uproot their lives just to find somewhere to live. If we're going to deliver that for our communities and for the next generation, we need to build the right homes in the right places with the right local services and infrastructure, which whatever Ruth says she's been doing simply isn't keeping up at the moment. Our children need houses in our communities, but Nottingham Labour, like was mentioned, have been pushing houses over the border, and Rushcliffe Conservatives keep building the wrong houses in the wrong places. We need to engage with local communities to find the best fit for the communities and make sure there's the right mix of houses for residents and not just the houses that will make the most profit for developers, so that we can build sustainable communities that people will want to live in going forwards.
Thanks very much. Well, thanks all for your thoughts there. I'm just going to open up the floor now to see if anyone has any further comments they wish to make at this point. I mean, I was picking up on a few themes there, in particular affordability, which is a big issue in Rushcliffe, of course, and young people either with renting or getting on the housing ladder. So I'm just opening up to the floor to anyone now if they want to comment.
I mean, one thing I would personally like to see is the ability for councils to be looking at building more housing that's there for a wider social need. I think councils have been under the quash for quite a long time. And so we've ultimately now in a position where we have less social housing than we have done in this country for a long time. And in places like Rushcliffe, where prices are very high, that is challenging. We're also not necessarily building the right houses. 38% of houses that have been built since 2011 in Rushcliffe have been 4-bed or more. And that doesn't help with this issue around affordability, because the average house price is just moving upwards. So I think, as was suggested there by Greg, are we building the right houses in the right places? That needs to be an active conversation, ultimately with the local planning authority, which is the Borough Council. And that's certainly something that I would be looking to pursue very, very clearly in the interest of residents, to make sure that we're getting the right deal and we're getting the right things built in the right places.
I'm glad to hear James agreeing with me that we do need to have the right mix of houses, not just the right mix of profit. I'm going to flag, though, James, that you say you want more social housing. That's not what Labour have actually done when they've been in government locally or nationally for a really long time. We need the social housing, and we need that actual commitment to follow through, not just warm words at election time.
James, I'll come to you then, Ruth. James, sorry, did you want to respond to that?
Can I respond?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were inviting someone else in. No, I mean, all I'll say, Greg, is I look after a council with 6,500 social houses. We have been building because we believe that we need that. It needs to be part of the mix in our community, just as we need more sheltered accommodation and first-time buyer homes. There needs to be a broader spread, and I'm not sure that we're achieving that at the moment in Rushcliffe.
Ruth, you raised your hand.
Thank you. Yes, so I'd just like to come back and pick up on one of the concerns Lynn raised, actually, about giving communities more of a say. And that was a core part of the planning reforms that myself and many other Conservative MPs fought for, to abolish these mandatory top-down targets and also to give communities more of a say. And I hope that that will lead, it's certainly something that I would push for if re-elected, for more suitable housing for community needs. So, of course, we do have a lot of families in Rushcliffe and we need housing for them. We also have a lot of older people and people who are thinking of downsizing as they retire. And so we need more houses for them too. And I think I just want to flag one final thing. James has, said that he will fight for he wants to prioritise areas that aren't the green belt, but that is not what Labour is saying. They've said very clearly, I don't care if we flatten the whole green belt, we just need more houses in this country. That's what's come out from a Labour official this morning. Now, I appreciate that, James will stand by his word, I'm sure he will, but Keir Starmer has made it very clear that he is not going to allow MPs to get in the way of his plans to build on the green belt. It's a very different approach to the one that the Prime Minister took in the last Parliament.
Thank you, Ruth. Now, I know others have raised their hands, but James, would you like to respond to that on behalf of the Labour Party?
Well, I mean, all I'll say is that, Rushcliffe's green belt has already been reallocated over the years. The particular site in Tollerton was included in the 2014 plan, and since then it hasn't had the green belt status that would maybe afford it some extra protection. So I don't think this is particularly about the Labour Party. What we have said is brownfield first, grey belt second, and green belt as a last resort. But if we're building on the green belt, that absolutely needs to be delivering for local people up to 50% affordable housing, because there needs to be benefits that are seen locally if the strategic asset, which is the green belt, is being changed in some way. But the green belt has already been changed, and that's why some of the applications that have been more contentious in Rushcliffe are a source of pain for local people, and that was the decision that has been taken by the local planning authority.
I'm just going to come to Harbant because she was raising her hand earlier.
I just basically say, right, if we actually look at the young people for their education, for their employment, for their salaries, for what they're earning, how they're earning, and if you can help them to achieve their potentials and they can be working well, then they can be able to, and the houses prices need to be down for just general public who can actually able to buy easily, because that's the duty is making a big issue, and the interest rate is going up and up, which is people are finding difficult to pay the mortgage. How are they going to look into buy the houses then? The houses are there. Houses are enough, right? But they are actually not affordable. For people can move on to the other areas. If they want to buy the houses, they can buy the houses. But the problem is we're not looking at the root things, what is actually need to factor to that.
Thank you. And Lynn, we'll just give you the final say on this before we move on to the next question.
Okay, well, Westminster and probably particularly the Tories are in the thrall of a powerful development lobby. And in the end, it's the corporate agenda that determines what the Tories and Labour do and not what people want. So we have to basically get our power back, get them governing for the people and not for the corporations. So you can say what you like, but in the end, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And there has been a ridiculous amount of greenbelt eaten up by really not very well thought out housing estates. I mean, the planning laws are quite strict. If I want to do something to my house, or if I want to build a new house, I have to go through all sorts of procedures, and I have to justify it, and I have to come up with environmental mitigations and all sorts of things. These just thrown up in hardly any time at all, despite what the people want.
We are going to move on now. It's obviously a great debate and a big issue for Rushcliffe, but there are more issues we need to talk about. So, Ollie, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so this is an issue that's connected in many ways to the topic we've just been discussing there. Recent figures revealed that Rushcliffe is the Nottinghamshire borough where the lowest percentage of pupils were offered one of their preferences in terms of September 2024 school admissions. And last year we heard the story of a girl in Ruddington offered a school place 2 hours away from home. So how would you increase the number of good school places in Rushcliffe?
Ruth, first, please.
Thank you, Natalie. So yes, this has been one of the key campaigns I've been working on. We do need to expand our local schools. We are having a huge expansion of Rushcliffe Spencer. £27 million is being put into that, and hundreds more places are being created. We've also expanded South Wolds Academy as well, and I've worked with the school to get funding for a new teaching block. We're also building new schools. There's a new primary school, of course, being built in East Leek, Millside Primary, for £14 million. And I've been working with families where they have been offered a place that's been, so far away. I have taken those cases up with the county council on their behalf, because obviously we need to have good local school places for all our local children. And if I'm re-elected, I'll continue to do exactly what I've been doing for the last few years and making sure that we can expand our schools. The one thing I won't be doing is supporting Labour's tax on education and increasing private school fees by 20%. Okay.
Thanks very much. Lynn, over to you.
Well, education it's very complex, isn't it? I think just bunging more school places is probably a little naive. The quality of the schools is so important, and both Labour and Tory have spent a long time centralising schools into ever bigger units instead of having smaller or perhaps village-based schools that can tailor to individual needs. They've also been very oppressive about other options. So I home educate my children, but I get hassled for doing so. And that takes a lot of people would do it if they thought they could, if they were empowered to do that. But they aren't. So the pressure is not put on the schools. So, yes, increase school places because the number of houses has increased. And that should have been thought through before the housing estate was put on, and probably put on as a condition of building a housing estate. But also look at the quality of the schools, and are we providing the right sort of schools? There's a lot of people being forced to stay in schools that aren't suitable for them, above an age that's not suitable, when they would be better out doing apprenticeship. Okay, thank you.
Just to remind other candidates that we can hear you typing while other people are talking, and just a little bit distracting there. So, James, over to you for your answer, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is definitely something that's come up on the doorstep many times. And obviously, one of the advantages of Rushcliffe is its schools, and that's why people want to move there. But we need to recognise that there is absolutely pressure on the existing schools. So it is good that capacity is being expanded. However, is it being expanded quick enough when there are children that are being bused well over an hour to get to the appropriate school? From a Labour perspective, I think what we've been saying is we need to absolutely prioritise the infrastructure that's being built. A lot of this is agreed in planning. So there's a situation where I am, where we've had a primary school, but it's taken 2-3 years for it to finally get into the planning chain, and now a school is being built. But that's 3 or 4 years after a lot of people have moved to that estate. So we need to really start making sure that things are being built quickly and the infrastructure is there so that people are benefiting when these new estates are in place.
Thanks very much. And Harbant, over to you.
Education is very important for the young people and for community and everybody. The main thing is actually we need to look at the issues. Any school can be good. Any school can give a good education to the child, as long as that they are not get bullied. Their behavior is being, if there is a behavior problem, they need to be actually dealt with in an appropriate way, so they can be actually sit in the classroom, can achieve some education. Same is, I've been dealing with so many issues in the community through that schools, bullying, nagging, and going in the classroom, not actually concentrating, not listening to the teachers. We need to go to actually find out from the young people what making them not to achieve that education in a right way. They can achieve in any school. There is no difference. If somebody is good in his education, can learn something, they can learn in any way. I go 4 children and they were going to the same school, whatever normal school is. And why is that people looking for the new school and different school going there and not there? Yeah.
Thank you. And Greg?
It really should be a basic thing for all children that schools are available and in reach. Most of us would be reluctant to take a job as far away as some children have currently got to go. So why are we forcing children to travel that every day and make their day-to-day community out of reach of their home lives while they're trying to be developing that? A lot of this problem is because both the current Conservative, but also realistically the last Labour government, built new homes, but without the services to back them up, like we were saying in the previous debate. The schools we've got at the moment, because of that, they're too full, they're often too far away, they're badly underfunded. And in spite of our teachers' best efforts, they're letting children down, creating a mental health crisis in our young people. We need to properly invest in all schools to make sure there are good schools actually in reach of all local communities, teachers supported to do their jobs properly and given the resources they need to actually serve our children properly.
Thanks very much. And we'll open up the debate as we did last time. It's obviously a contentious issue. School places in Rushcliffe are in high demand. We've got some excellent schools in Rushcliffe, of course. But the policy that's been hitting the headlines is the Labour Party, who are saying they're going to put VAT on private school fees, which, as a journalist, I feel that might impact parents in Rushcliffe and whether they can send their children to state school or private school. And I'd be interested to hear people's views on that, just feeding into this debate, if anyone wants to dive in.
Well, obviously the attack on this is it's basically Labour's jealousy politics, isn't it? Why is education? Why would you tax education? That has always been considered a worthwhile charitable thing. And if people want to put them in a different school to the local one, then I think that's up to them, because not all schools are the same. I mean, they're getting more homogenous. They're becoming more shades of grey because of government control, the imposition of the national curriculum, and one size fits nobody education. But in the end, if people think their child will thrive in a different school, not even a better one, but just a different school with different teachers, then that is their choice, and we should be supporting it and not penalising them for making that choice for their kids.
James, as it's a Labour policy?
Yes, I can come back on that. Look, I think this policy, there's choices. We need to make sure that schools are funded appropriately. The reality is that those that are in the private sector are getting a better funded education than those that are in the state sector. That needs to be readdressed. We want everybody to have the opportunity to get a good education, whether they're going through the private route or through the public route. 7.5 million children are educated in the state sector versus 500,000 in the private sector. And we need to get to the point where the 7.5 million are getting a better education. And that simply hasn't been the case over the past decade. There are instances where parents are paying for children to take in pens and papers and all these sorts of things. And I just think we need to get to the point where everybody has that better opportunity. Private school fees have gone up by 55% since 2003. That is not comparative to the state sector. And that's why we're seeing this squeeze on quality and retaining teachers and teaching assistants in the classrooms. So we need to recognise the bigger picture, which is about getting everyone really good education.
I'm going to go to Ruth now.
Thank you, Natalie. So this is a policy that's causing huge concern amongst parents in Rushcliffe, and many of them have raised it with me. So school funding is at record high at the moment. the number of schools that are good or outstanding is now at 90%, up from 68% when Labour left office. We have gone shooting up the international tables for reading and for maths as well. Our educational standards are improving. And we have 27,000 more teachers in our schools than we did back in 2010. And I really, really am concerned about the impact, particularly in Rushcliffe, where we do have very popular state schools, that this policy is going to have. I think it's morally wrong. I think the state has a duty to provide a good education, which it is doing. But I think if parents want to, pay for their own children's education, we shouldn't be financially penalising them for doing that. But I think this sudden increase of 20% on school fees will lead a lot of parents who have children at independent local schools to conclude that they can't afford this, and that we will see many more children coming into the local state sector, putting more pressure on places, just as we expanded those places and hopefully began to alleviate the problem. So I am really concerned about that. And I know lots of people in Rushcliffe are too.
Lynn, I saw you raised your hand. Yeah.
Yes. So you have to really ask, why are people choosing independent education? How about you get your state schools up to scratch instead of penalising people who are choosing an independent education or even choosing to home ed? I know Labour don't like that policy. Tory don't like home eders either. They like to have the children under the control of the national curriculum. But the reason we home ed and the reason people go to independent schools is because the state schools are not up to scratch, and they're not going to be, because, just this year, English teachers are not coming through as fast as they are leaving. So you can go on about extra teachers all you like, but the fact is these specialist teachers are not going to be there. And that's because I speak as a former teacher. That is because the conditions in school are so unsatisfactory. We spend so much time dealing with dross and following the national curriculum and ticking the boxes, and very little time actually teaching. So when I did supply teaching, which I thought I was a bit sniffy about, I really enjoyed it, because all I did was go in and spend a solid hour, which is exhausting actually, just teaching, not sorting out discipline, not sorting out anything else. That's what you need to sort out your schools.
Thank you, Lynn. Would anyone else like to come into this debate?
I think the point you just made there at the start is exactly that. We need to see education improve, and we can generate 1.3 billion through this approach, and that would go straight back into making sure that we've got schools that are better funded, that we can pay for more teachers, that we can make sure that there's additional nursery places, etc. So I think we have to recognise that the schooling system is not where we currently want it to be, and that it needs more investment. The alternative, of course, is to look at taxes across the board, but that isn't necessarily going to that's going to impact those at the bottom. And also, I think we have to recognise that because the private sector has experienced such fee increases, there are choices to be made by that sector about how any fee increases are passed on. We've got a situation, Eton's got a 2-kilometre rowing lake, we've got 40 to 50 football pitches. That's not a common school experience. And so I think we need to use this as a way of levelling things up a little.
Greg, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just going to say, Ruth, you were talking about the level of school funding and suggesting it's doing brilliantly. If that's the case, why have we got so many reports of schools that are physically crumbling, falling apart because the maintenance backlog hasn't been maintained? If the school funding's so good, why have we got so many children in overcrowded classes that are well over the levels they're supposed to be at in the numbers? The fact is, the numbers you're quoting don't reflect the reality people are seeing on the ground. They don't reflect the demand that is needed. And if we're going to get the children the education they need, we need more than the complacency that we've seen from the Conservatives over the last Parliament about education.
Ruth?
Well, the numbers I'm quoting are fact. They're not like a matter of political opinion. They're a matter
I'm not disputing your numbers. I'm disputing the need.
And I've just set out very clearly some really big and significant investments in facilities in Rushcliffe schools that I've worked with the local council and the government to bring about. We've also got the government schools rebuilding programme. We have schools in Rushcliffe that are part of that, addressing the issue of old areas of the school's estate that needs to be improved. So there's a huge amount of funding which has gone into schools. Of course, there's more to do. I'm not querying that at all. But what I am querying is whether having a policy that will increase class sizes overnight by whacking up the costs that parents have to send their schools to private schools is going to really help the majority of people in the state sector. I think we'll end up having to pay for more children's education as a result.
We do need to move on to the next question now. I appreciate there's a lot of strong feelings about that issue, but we want to cover as many issues as possible. So we'll take these in reverse alphabetical order. So over to you, Ollie.
Thank you very much. So when I was speaking to people in West Bridgford last week about the local issues they were concerned about, I have to say that there was broadly a lot of praise for living in Rushcliffe. But when I asked about those local concerns, it's potholes that came up time and time again. So how would you work to improve the state of Rushcliffe's roads?
Greg, you're up first, please.
Thank you. Again, it's very much what I was saying a moment ago about the schools. The Conservatives have been cutting investment across Rushcliffe, across the whole country, realistically. And the consequence of that is that we're just ending up with maintenance backlogs. We're ending up with horrendously potholed roads that almost feel like a roller coaster to drive over when you go down some of them. The answer to this isn't complicated. It's that we need a base level of investment to actually maintain these things, whereas the Conservatives have too often been running a policy of managed decline, of saying, OK, we don't actually need these things to be as good as they were. We're going to let them get worse. That's not acceptable. You're building up a debt for the future generations every time you do a policy like that. And that's been the Conservative policy for far too much of their time in office. And realistically, we just need to put the investment in and fix the maintenance backlog the Conservative government has left us with.
Thank you. Harbant, over to you.
I think it's seen as actually a very good area, but I agree to that, right? There is so many potholes and there's roads are broken in the streets. Wherever you go, the cars actually not easy to travel. And I think the government say that they spend so much money on these things, but they are not actually spending money. The work is not getting done in the time that they need to be done. I think when they're looking at the, sort of work need to be done, that need to be taken on board and actually invested and then done. Because otherwise it's going to be look not really good that how they're thinking the area is not looking that good. When I moved into the area, I was very appreciable and very actually impressed with the area, but now it's not the same because the government are saying they spend this much money and this much money but there is no, I can't see anything which is being spent, which has been done.
Thanks very much. James.
Yes, so I think the first thing the Labour Party has said is that it will defer one of the proposed schemes for the A27 and use that money to fix 1 million extra potholes a year. So that's a good start. But it is true that local councils have really felt the squeeze. It's ultimately Nottinghamshire County Council that looks after a lot of the roads in the area. I lead a small district council, and that district council, 65% of our funding in 2010 came from central government. That's now been reduced to around 25%. And councils have been forced to find other ways of generating income to cover things like resurfacing roads. Now, the reality is that there's big gaps that have needed to be closed, and they've struggled to do that, and therefore services have declined. So for me, potholes are a symptom of a lack of appreciation and funding into local government. And I think one thing COVID definitely showed was that local government really is close to people. It delivers such valuable services, and Labour would make sure that councils have a multi-year funding settlement so they can actually start to plan ahead rather than year on year.
Thank you. And Lynn.
Well, yes, definitely the pothole issue has really got on everyone's nerves, especially when they're fixed just prior to an election, as they were in front of the mayor campaign. Now, it's not actually rocket science. I mean, my husband looked this up, and there's about 2,000 miles of road in Nottinghamshire. Most of it quite minor. Should be pretty easy to fix, shouldn't it? A road has a 10-year life, which means you need to be fixing 200 miles of road a year, and they're currently fixing about 30. And patching up other bits. So there's, just basically do the maths. You're paid a lot of money to provide these services. Just get on and do it instead of your net zero virtue signalling rubbish. And so the other thing is, why keep using these fragile road surfaces if they can't last? They can't last a bit of rain and snow and whatever. Start looking at proper road surfaces. There's some great schemes in India that use recycled rubber tyres, and they're very durable and they resist. Okay.
Thank you. That was a minute. And Ruth.
Yeah, I agree on the road surfaces. It's not just an issue raised by people in West Bridgford. It's all over Rushcliffe. We've had 2 years of extremely bad weather, lots of water on the roads. We've also obviously had inflation pushing up the prices of those repairs. So that's why I've worked with other Nottinghamshire MPs. We've been to see the Chancellor, we went to see the Secretary of State for Transport, and we said, look, we appreciate this isn't, perhaps a exciting, big sexy transport announcement to put in your budget, but we really need more money to fix our roads. And so we've got an increase of about a third in Nottinghamshire's road budget. It's gone up by £24 million. And the Conservatives' manifesto is very clear. We will use £8.3 billion from the cancellation of HS2. We will bring that money forward into this financial year and next financial year, and we will use that to fix potholes and mend our road surfaces. And if I'm re-elected, I will be straight down to Parliament to make our argument for that money to be spent in Nottinghamshire and in Rushcliffe.
Thanks very much, Ruth. We are going to move straight on to the final question now, because we've spent a lot of time debating, but we need to get through some of the questions. So, Ollie.
Yeah, so just finally, at every general election, there does seem to be a greater desire for candidates who are local to the area that they're standing in. So do you all live in Rushcliffe? And either way, what is your favourite thing about the area?
Greg, we'll come to you first, please.
I've lived in the East Midlands for a number of years. I haven't had the privilege of living in Rushcliffe itself yet, but it's an area I've long had links to and very much enjoy my time in. I will admit one thing I love about Rushcliffe is the beautiful countryside, and just it's a lovely area to travel around in, whether I'm walking my dog, whether I'm riding my bike, or whether I'm just driving around with the children, enjoying the scenery. It's a lovely place to live.
Thanks very much. Harbant?
I've been living in this area actually last 34 years. And when I moved in, actually, looks quite good and very impressive and all that. But I think it's been gone down a bit, right? But I think we need to look at that. We need to have more parks, places, more, sort of places where the young people can actually able to, do some activities and enjoy themselves and be open in the open air, which is environment is good for them, right?
Thanks very much. James?
So no, I'm not from Rushcliffe. I've been based in Nottinghamshire my whole life since I was 7 weeks old. I grew up on a farm in a small village, but my wife has family at Crotwell Bishop and they've been there for over 20 years. I think what attracts me to Rushcliffe is its similarities with where I grew up. They've both got ex-mining communities. They've both got hundreds of farms scattered around. They've got huge power station sites, which are the future really of these areas. Ultimately, for me, I think it's about being an effective MP. You need to have vision, drive, you need to be responsive, you need to have experiences in the public and the private sector. And that's all stuff that I want to put to good use for the people of Rushcliffe. In terms of my favourite place, I guess the country park will no doubt be high up on most people's lists, but I will shout out for the Framework Knitters Museum, where I've had many a good brownie over recent weeks.
Thanks very much. And Lynn?
Well, yes, I'm from Rushcliffe. Many generations in our graveyard. We're not a very adventurous bunch, apparently. I did live away for about 10 years, and then I returned to have children here. So yeah, I love the area as like a little oasis between Nottingham and Leicester. And I've always loved the countryside. My parents owned the village shop and farmed, so we're very connected to the countryside. I personally love the walks over the standards and the Grantham Canal, down the Grantham Canal. I think that's a brilliant facility. So yes, I've been a bit sad at how it's degenerated, especially around some of the we did have some lovely villages that have been swallowed up into suburbia. So I do think we are struggling a little bit with that. But basically, I love it that we're always a little bit behind the times. We have great Stilton cheese, and we're always a little bit cautious about going with the latest thing, aren't we? So I quite like that about the people, the very community. They put us first.
Thank you. And Ruth?
So we moved to the area in 2019. We're just down the road from Hickling. We're here with our donkeys, alpacas, 3 dogs now, the chickens, my husband's bee collection. So I love our countryside. We're obviously, very, very country people. We love the open spaces in Rushcliffe. I think the thing I like most about it is the unique character of all the different villages, and also the town of West Bridgeford as well. I love the Grantham Canal. It's a wonderful place to walk along. I'm not going to get into where the best cake in Rushcliffe is. There's so many options, and I think it would be more contentious than anything we've discussed so far. But I do agree that the Framework Knitters Museum serves up a lovely brownie. So do Tiffin and lots of other places as well. So I think the unique communities, the wonderful independent businesses we have here create a fantastic place to live, really.
Thanks very much. And if nothing else, I think people will come out of this today with some brownie recommendations. So that's got to be a good thing.
I can give you more if you want.
Can I add something?
Yes, certainly.
I will say I would probably prefer to be actually adding some more youth clubs in this area. There is no young people's provision much, and which is the young people are on the street, which is not very healthy for the young people and for our community. That's very important issue.
Thank you. We're going to come to closing statements now, and we will do that again in alphabetical order. So Ruth, you're up straight away again. Thank you.
Thank you. There's not a lot of trust in politics at the moment. So why should you trust me? I've spent the last 4 years doing exactly what I said I'd do in Rushcliffe when I was stood for election in 2019. Getting investment in new healthcare facilities and more funding for our schools, tackling flooding, reforming planning laws to protect our countryside. Labour has made it clear they would rip these protections up. Supporting a new business park focused on green energy at Ratcliffe-on-Soar Power Station. Getting our fair share of police officers and funding, improving bus services, fighting for more trains and to fix our roads. Getting high-speed broadband rolled out in our rural villages, supporting over 15,000 constituents with problems and issues. You don't need to take my word for it. Head to my pinned post on Facebook and see why other people in Rushcliffe are voting for me. I've been working with you to make life better here for the last 4 years, and that's why you can trust me to deliver for you in the next 4 years.
Thank you, Ruth. Lynn, your closing statement, please.
Well, Labour and Conservative are both going to promise loads of money for everything, aren't they? The fact is that there is no money, that we're £1 trillion in debt. And if you don't know what that looks like, 1 trillion seconds, we were still living in caves. So there is no new money. They will have to rob Peter to pay Paul. So we have to basically start looking after ourselves. We can barely keep up with the interest on the debt payments in this country. So that's with the tax we currently have. That's where all your money is going. We have to basically rebuild our communities and take responsibility for ourselves, taking the power away from Westminster, keeping more of our own money and spending it on what we need. And I think that's where I think direct democracy and having MPs that actually serve us rather than the corporatocracy is really important. At the moment, Westminster has a globalist agenda, a corporate dictated agenda that basically funnels our money into the pockets of the ultra rich.
Thanks very much, Lynn. James.
Thank you. Look, the question being put before the electorate on the 4th of July isn't a momentary one. The decision's going to stick for the next 4 or 5 years. So the question really is, what do you want to wake up to on the morning of the 5th of July? I personally want to wake up to the news that we've turned the page on the past 14 years of chaos. We need to start rebuilding our public services because this country isn't working quite as well as it should. Labour has promised to implement tough fiscal rules, to transform the NHS into a neighbourhood health service, to set up publicly owned Great British Energy, to build greener infrastructure, to give communities control over buses, to take rail into public ownership. We need to take tough action on the water companies, and we want to improve access to nature and promote biodiversity. Things can and should be done differently. And so for positive change and a strong local voice as that change is happening, please vote Labour.
Thanks very much. Harbant?
I will believe in actually the power of the people. The power is the people is actually now they are wake up. They've seen all that parties, what they've been actually achieving, what they've not been achieving. They are desperate to have a change. And I think it's more important is I'm a leader for the young people from the day, from the day 1992. I've been working as young youth worker and taking them adventures, all these activities. And I am actually standing up for the wake up call for them. They can change things and we can change things together. The policies should be for the people and by the people, and shouldn't be for the people to be actually arguing and fighting. They should be all, if it's one party win, the other party win as well. They should be working in harmony. They shouldn't be picking on each other. They should be criticizing of each other. They should be actually working as a family. If you look at the family, if we have one person going the different direction and the other going different direction, the family not going to be good, not going to be happy family.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Greg.
Thank you, everyone. If you listen to what Ruth's been saying, everything's brilliant in Rushcliffe and getting better. But the truth is, people are really worried that so much they see is falling apart and getting worse. She is running against her own Conservative government's record. I'm sure she personally works hard, but she's asking us to elect her to a party that has been opposing all the investment she says she's been putting in. That doesn't make sense. And Labour's plans, well, they keep changing, leaving people confused about what they might get if they vote Labour in reality. If you vote Lib Dem, you'll be voting for a fair deal for everyone, investment in local services, a stable, fair economy that works for us all, fixing the sewage crisis that's turned our rivers into stinking sewers, fixing broken roads, overcrowded schools, unavailable hospitals, making real work to address the climate crisis, and building communities and a country that works for you. Vote Lib Dem and let's see a fair deal for all that we can be proud of.
Thank you, Greg. Well, unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our hustings.
I have a right of reply there, because Greg said the government was opposing the investment that I've been working for. The government has provided the investment that I've been campaigning for as this constituency MP.
Ruth, the investment you're talking about is investment that's specifically only needed because the government has been underinvesting. If you're trying to say that Rushcliffe is doing brilliantly with this because of all your work, it's only because the government has been leaving the whole country behind and has been forcing MPs like you to be begging for scraps to fix small little things while leaving the big picture falling apart.
One at a time.
The NHS is recovering from the pandemic. You're ignoring all of the things we've had to face in the last 4 years.
A lot of which you caused and created. We still have a record waiting list, even accounting for the pandemic effect. We still have major economic problems caused by the way your party has handled Brexit. None of this is something that you can claim credit for, Ruth. You have to recognise your party has been the cause of so much of this problem.
I don't recognise that at all. And if you're suggesting that the pandemic was an issue for the UK or that high inflation or energy prices were, you really need to look at what's happened in the rest of the world.
You used that pandemic for the biggest wealth transfer this country has ever seen, the world has ever seen. The transfer of our money to these oligarchs via PPE, phone apps, vaccinations that have not proven to be very successful, have they? And basically, you caused this black hole in finances. It was just a free-for-all for the Tories and their friends. Absolutely ridiculous.
Ruth, I'll just let you have the final say on that.
Well, I completely disagree with that. The government spent over £400 billion supporting people, businesses and jobs.
They took it back.
Pandemic, through high energy prices. At the highest point, we were paying about half of the average household's energy bill in 2022. And of course, that has an impact on the public finances. But the alternative of not doing that would have been disastrous for people.
It was disastrous.
Let Ruth respond.
We had a decade. Sorry, Ruth. We had a decade before COVID hit. You know, when we were talking earlier about funding around potholes and local councils, there were choices made for a decade before COVID became the issue that it was. I'm sure all governments would have had to make an intervention, as your government did. But the reality is that we've had a decade of austerity, and the consequences of that are being felt in public services everywhere. And that's what
were we faced with when we took office, James? An economy in ruins and a note from your Treasury ministers saying, I'm sorry, there's no money left.
but we found
And
money.
now even less.
You threw away a totally good epidemic plan and went into lockstep with the rest of the global economy. The epidemic plan has been well thought out. It was supposed to prevent this, I almost swore, I'm sorry, prevent this show, to prevent the lockdowns and prevent the people having to stop working and prevent kids having to go to school. It was a good plan, and you just threw it out with no reasoning whatsoever. And that is what's caused this problem and caused so much heartache and mental health problems from the pandemic. It could have all been avoided. It was entirely the Tories.
I think we are going to have to leave it there for today. I know we were getting into a good debate there, but we have nearly an hour now, so we've gone slightly over. But I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone for your preparation and your commitment to coming today and the time you spent on the call and the answers and the debate. We've managed to keep it civil, which is great. And I just wanted to say best of luck to all of you with the rest of the campaigning. And of course, we'll be reporting on the result on Nottinghamshire Live. Thank you again for your